Ms. Snyder, we are live.
All right, thank you. Today is August 23rd, 2021, and this is a special executive committee meeting. Maybe start with roll call.
Sure. Ms. Ching?
Here.
Mr. Betcher?
Here.
Mr. Wilkinson?
Here.
Mr. Simile?
Here.
Ms. Snyder?
Here.
All members are present.
I forgot. Mr. Pitts.
Isn't he?
Oh, I'm sorry. And I'm sorry, Mr. Presnoff is absent. Sorry about that.
Do we have a motion to excuse Mr. Pridmanoff?
Motion to excuse.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you. Has everyone had a chance to review the agenda today? If so, do I have a motion to accept?
Motion to accept.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. And we do not have anyone registered to speak today, but we do have with us via Zoom, I believe, the inspector who compiled the report for our playground equipment, which we are here to discuss today. I'm hoping that we can let him go sooner rather than later. So I would like to begin with him, and Mr. Hurth could introduce him, and maybe we can have about 15 minutes of his time to go through any questions we might have.
So I have to learn how to do this.
There he is.
There he is. Greg, you're online. Everybody can see you. So this is Greg Henneke. Greg Henneke is an inspector in the state of Ohio of playground equipment. My first experience with Mr. Henneke was in 2018 as he had been contracted with the Ohio plan. As we do on a regular basis, there's a hard audit of our playground equipment. We have discussions every now and then. It's been a while since I've seen him. So Greg, thank you. We asked Greg to go ahead and do an evaluation of our structure, and that is the result of the report that you all received earlier this week.
All right. Would you mind giving us a brief overview, maybe? I know hopefully we have all had time to review the report, but if you could just give us a brief summary. I know that I was able to get one from you when we were on a conference call with Mr. Hurth, but I would like everyone else to hear.
Yeah, and I should say, Greg, we want to try and limit the discussion of the old structure to about 10, 15 minutes.
Okay. So the audit that I did, the audit level inspection is literally a nuts and bolts level inspection, counting threads, et cetera, that extend out beyond the face of nuts, that kind of thing, looking for various types of hazards that are recognized in the playground safety industry. Overall, I was, as I indicated to Ron, I was pleasantly surprised that the structure was in much better condition than I anticipated. However, we still face 3 priority 1 hazards. Hazard, as I listed at the very end of my report, can result in many types of very serious permanent injuries, if not a fatal injury. So you had 3 of those present, and we had just various others with the equipment, mostly wear and tear. You've got some corrosion, rusting going on because of the vinyl plastic coating that has worn away and allowed the bare metal to be exposed. It's in my opinion that a lot of the grates, extended metal grates, will need to be replaced if you are going for the option of making repairs to the equipment, as those are weak and strong. Trying to think. And you've got some items that can be, simply your metal on metal connectors, a barrier panel, come up the main entrance point, the main deck, and that leads off to an overhead ring track activity component. The left side of your, the inner has basically been removed, torn away. The lower bracket has actually torn away and opened up a larger than the manufacturer produced size hole in the metal. That really needs to be welded back in place. On a technicality, that whole barrier system is not really required per the ASTM F1487 standard. So you could actually do away with that, but you still need to make the appropriate repair to that hole in the metal pipe. The bracket that's left there on the top end of that is a protrusion hazard. And it can cause serious injury, body organ injury if the child were to strike it just at the right angle. Let's see, the surfacing is probably the bigger issue. And the biggest issue that we're dealing with is that we have a designated play surface. That's an area where a child is either intended by the manufacturer to be able to sit, stand, walk, or climb on, or it's a physical space that is greater than 2 by 2 inches by 2 inches, and within 30 degrees of horizontal. And the problem with the designated play surface I identified is on the top of the hood to the spiral slide. The problem this is creating is that when it was installed, it was most likely calculated that the highest designated play surface was to the platform that services that spiral slide. Unfortunately, the top of the hood now qualifies as a designated play surface, and so that is now a 13-foot fall height instead of approximately a 9-foot fall height, which has a significant impact with respect to your protective surfacing. Unfortunately, we have no documentation from Hafner & Sons, who you are purchasing your mulch from, that tells us what that mulch is certified to as far as the fall height. So we would have to do a lot of work to make some corrections. Anytime we make repairs to the playground equipment, you need to, number one, make sure you are purchasing the manufacturer's products. So as a game time structure, so we need to go back to game time to purchase their products to make the appropriate repairs. Secondly, we need to make sure that we're contacting game time and getting instructions from them in writing on what to do, how to handle this. This particular situation, I would recommend that we would contact game time and share with them the photo and the information I've provided in my report, that is a designated play surface. And is there any way, do they have any options available to you in lieu of buying a whole new spiral slide section that we can use to eliminate that designated play surface? If we eliminate that designated play surface on the top of the hood, then you can drop that play surface down to that platform, and you'll be in much better shape and condition as far as fall height. With respect to your liability from the insurance side of things, you are obviously a political subdivision, and Ohio Revised Code 2744 gives you your civil liability immunity protections. And unfortunately, they're not blanket. There are exceptions to those rules. And one of those, if you have physical defects present and you know about them, you fail to take corrective action, and then a child or a member of the community is injured, you will lose your immunity protections. So the number of hazards that I found, along with this designated play surface issue with the surfacing, would all qualify as physical defects and could cost you your immunity protections if we don't take the appropriate corrective actions. So that's probably a really good summary at this point. Open up for take questions.
It is, thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
I do.
Ms.
Greg?
Cheney?
Yeah, Greg,
Yeah.
in your report, you say the equipment, the structure is good condition, but then it has those 3 number 1s and it has some number 2s. That to me tells me a child can be injured or killed. So to me, that doesn't sound like good condition. Can you explain that to me?
So those are individual hazards, and again, those hazards can be remedied. They can be corrected. So it's just a matter of making the appropriate corrections and bringing the equipment into compliance.
Okay. Should we shut the equipment down and not let anybody play on it right now?
I would recommend that, yes.
That's what I think.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Simile,
I'm sorry, the mayor had his hand up
Sorry.
first.
Mr. Mayor.
Following up with what Sharon was saying in agreement, what's the best, can we like wrap tape around that? How do we shut it down? Have you seen that happen before with your experience? What's the sufficient way of indicating for our protection in terms of our liability that it is shut down? Do we need to like close the entire park, or can we wrap yellow tape around it? What's the?
That's a hard one. The best way, if you could close the whole park down, great. But at the same time, you're alienating the other amenities that you have available in the park. The caution tape simply won't work. We know that just doesn't work simply because kids will, even parents will knock it away and let their kids go play on it.
I think there were some solutions that we used during the pandemic when the park was open and we were keeping people away from the play set. I'd let our maintenance department figure that out.
Okay.
Who is
Yeah,
next?
like I said, it's just, having been through the COVID and everything, people, again, in several areas, did a good job, but again, I don't know how that worked at your park, et cetera. But, traditionally, the caution tape goes to the wayside.
Thank you. I believe that Mr. Van Harn had his hand up next.
I was just gonna comment, maybe we can borrow some fencing from Circus Cincinnati.
That's a good thought. Mr. Simile?
Yes, curious to know, what is the average life expectancy for equipment like this?
20 years.
And do we know offhand how this equipment is?
We believe it was 1998.
22.
And
You're pushing approximately 23 years now.
Right.
And I had asked when we spoke before about whether it was even worthwhile to consider refurbishing. And I know you didn't really want to give an answer on how long we could extend its life potentially.
Right.
Do you recall what your answer was? I know you said there were many variables, like we discussed,
Right.
how many children are playing, et cetera, but.
Right. You could potentially extend it up, maybe, again, I'm just throwing these numbers out because, again, it all comes down to wear care factors. You could possibly extend it out another 10 years, perhaps. It just depends on, if you go through and make all the, appropriate corrections, replace your decking. Like I said, you had several sections of the decking that were weak, which tells me that, they're compromised. It really is going to come down to having a quote from somebody who can, do the appropriate repairs versus, I know the dilemma is, well, do we just replace the equipment? And you would have to make that determination based on that type of information. Like I said, I unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball. We're taking a stab in the dark, so to speak, but, with all new components, as far as decking and some of the items that have been addressed, you could potentially extend the life quite a while.
Thank you.
Keep in mind, though, when we're doing that, the ASTM F1487 standard changes periodically. Matter of fact, we just got a new edition this late spring, 21 edition. And so as things change, you as the owner operator have an obligation to make sure your equipment is in compliance to those standards. Keep in mind that the ASTM standards are voluntary. However, they are the standards and the documents that you will be held to in court of law against in a claim of negligence.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any other, Mr. Van Harn?
Yeah, I know you're not with Game Time, but can you give some idea of some changes they've made and how they make that equipment that are different than now? And I forget my other question. I'll think of it.
No, because like I said, I'm like as you indicated, I'm not with Game Time, so I don't stay up on their particular changes that they make in production systems. Like I said, the equipment overall is in good shape, is in good condition. I've just Matter of fact, it's been on some equipment that was over 20 years old, 22 to be exact, and it was time to replace it because it had so much wear and tear. The decks were, twice, if not three times in worse condition than what yours were, and just a number of other issues. So, again, it comes back to do they have the parts? That'll be the other issue that you'll run into, and you'll be able to find out so that way you can make a good decision. Is okay, do they have all these deck components available to you to make those effective repairs? And once you get into getting quotes for that material, those parts, you may very well find out that you can't make the repairs and you're left with no other option.
Right.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I can't give you any more guidance there because I don't get into, I just do inspections only. I don't get into the repair side.
Okay, Greg. So let's assume that we go ahead and we refurbish this equipment. Okay, then the ones that are number 4 on the list and number 3 on the list, they're going to deteriorate, and we're going to end up in a few years replacing those. Correct? Probably.
Yes, most likely. Again, that's where. So the audit process identifies all the non-compliant conditions. We go through the process. You go through the process of bringing everything into compliance. Then my recommendation would be to implement a routine inspection and maintenance program where you are inspecting it periodically, and that inspection protocol looks for changes in the equipment. Say, for example, on the swing set, you're going to have some of the bearings, the bushings were wearing out. The bushings on the bucket swings, because they get very little wear and tear and activity, they were in great condition. Unlike the belt swing, they were much more worn. So again, those are routine maintenance items that you can do to keep it in compliance. So you're not, once we bring it into compliance, you're not done. You will need to have an ongoing inspection and maintenance program.
And that's the point of us having regular inspections, correct? Even with new equipment that we purchase, we're going to slowly see changes, and we want to mitigate those.
Yes, and as I mentioned to Ron in prior conversations, let's just say you go down the road of putting in a brand new piece of equipment. You would want to do an audit inspection at the time of installation that guarantees that the installers installed it correctly and that you as an owner operator are starting with a piece of equipment that meets all the current standards and guidelines and is fully compliant. At that point, you would implement the inspection and maintenance program to maintain that compliance, and that way you can stay on top of it and not find yourself in if you stay on top of it, then you won't find yourself in this position years down the road.
Right. Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions? I know we kept him on the line. Yes.
I just wanted to see if you had any idea of what is the most expensive repair that needs to be made on the structure if it is to be repaired. Would it be the mulching, or would it be actually part of the structure itself?
Personally, I think it'll come down to the sections of platforms, getting those replaced, and between that and surfacing. I think I articulated the issue with the surfacing. You need to, if we're going to tear that out and put in new, we can't mix and match the surfacing products. So if I've got Hafner & Sons providing the surfacing and they can't provide it anymore, and I go over to Greg's Playground Mulch and I buy Greg's Playground Mulch and top it off, you've just now probably more than likely voided the warranty on Hafner & Sons as well as with the new vendor. So if you're going to do any type of surfacing outside of what Hafner & Sons has to offer, you will probably have to start over again, and that could be kind of costly.
Anybody else? All right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Oh, no problem. My pleasure.
Great.
Greg, thank you. If we have any further questions, I'll follow up with you. But again,
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate your help. And,
all right. You're welcome.
You have a great evening.
All right, best wishes, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Take care. Wow, we did that.
We did that. We weren't too far off time-wise either. Excellent.
So, Ms. Snyder, you asked me if I just give a quick recap on where we are currently. So, we had a discussion last week with the group that's funding this, and there had been a discussion earlier in the last couple of months about where are the grant documents for this, where was the application? Well, there was nothing like that, because this money became available to us during the time that the county and the federal government were peeling money off to us and saying, here, go spend this is COVID money. And one of the things that communities were doing was not refurbishing, but replacing playground equipment because there were problems with keeping it sanitary. And that frankly was an issue that we were having with our structure across the street. The paint oxidation was causing the sanitizing material that they were using to just soak into it. So we thought this was an opportunity to try and address that. And in the back of my mind, we had the discussion in 2018 that we were looking at needing to replace this. So we had talked with the Adventurous Child. I think we got to the point that Mayor Densmore and Ms. Snyder had reviewed that plan. I think that had also been presented to the executive committee at one point. And where we are now with this is a decision needs to be made in terms of first of all, I think we need to decide, are we going to refurbish that equipment or are we going to buy new stuff? Secondly, we need to be in a position where we can contract in some way with a vendor who will be willing to give us an invoice, which will start the project, and we will need to pay for that invoice soon. And I would say the deadline that we're working toward is September 15th.
So I have a question about the invoice. How detailed does that have to be? For example, could pieces of equipment change, or does it need to be itemized, we don't stray from this, or?
It was related to me that it could be as simple as a bill for design services.
Okay, so then we could always tweak that when if new things come to light, or
Yep.
we have issues with it. That's
So
great.
that gives us the flexibility that we're actually working with somebody who's going to design the space for us. I waited to get back to them until we had this meeting because I want to clarify again that that's the path that we're on, because some of the rules have changed over a period of time, and part of that is because the federal government is looking at how quickly and how efficiently this money is being doled out, how quickly it's being spent. So that's kind of the land that we're living in with this stuff right now. It's an easy grant, but it's not an easy grant.
Right.
I think Mayor Densmore, you and I had a conversation yesterday. I think I covered everything.
I presume so.
Yeah.
It's everyone questions from everybody.
Yeah, I'm just trying
I
to.
sent out an email. I don't know. I sent like an
I did
hour
see
ago
that.
kind of summarized, try to consolidate all the information that we had discussed and everything. And if I left anything out, I would ask you to fill it in.
I think that's it. So reading the mayor's, did everybody have a chance to read that memo by chance? Okay. So everybody has a pretty good sense of where this is at this point. So what I need from you guys this evening, I think it makes sense that the report was passed on to Game Time. Thank you, Mayor and Ashley, for finding them because they installed our stuff initially. That was a good thing. They are willing to work with us. They pass the report on to their group, who will formulate some type of a plan or recommendation to us about the current set. I would tell you that the rep's first reaction to me was there may be a number of things that may just make sense to replace it rather than to try to fix it, but they're going to go ahead and give us that assessment. Beyond that, I think once the one thing that we did not do, because he was running quickly and as was I today, we did not get a time frame in terms of when we might get that information back. I think it would make sense for this committee at some point to maybe have a discussion, as we did here with Mr. Gruey, to get some ideas in terms of what the scope of the work is that needs to be done to bring it into compliance. Some of that stuff to me, some of the loose bolts and things like that, I think are things that we can send our maintenance crew over to take a look at. Because some of that stuff just looks like it needs to be tightened. The larger things, such as the separation of the vinyl from the graded areas, the missing panels and those kinds of things, those are the things that I think we should really be concerned about. There was a note that the bottom of one of the slides was too high off the ground. I think something like that can be corrected with mulch. But one of the things that we are going to have to deal with is we were not aware that there was a standard playground mulch. We've just been buying playground mulch that was not certified. That's not something that's ever been enforced here. Now we know. It's kind of like the report. Now we know.
Right.
Now we
We're
need to
on
do something
notice.
about it.
So Hafner and Sons has the F1292 certified playground mulch,
Okay.
according to their website.
So that's something that we'll need to look into, making sure that that is that type of mulch that we're purchasing. It sounds like I'm not sure, I don't know that I understand exactly the height of the tube and how that relates
I
to the
believe,
ground.
so they're calculating it from the very top of the tube because it's a play surface if a kid can climb up there.
Okay,
And so before they were looking at where you got in the tube. So there's, roughly a 4-foot difference. So that impact,
There was
when they fall,
wasn't there something blocking from children being able to climb on top of the tube, right? That was my understanding of
No,
what he
it's a
was.
different area.
yeah.
The
it's-
13-foot.
They were-
So I think he's suggesting that we ask Game Time if there is something they can put up to
Yeah.
block them, so that changes.
yeah, and I was looking for that top and I never did see it.
So it's the angle of the surface that, because it's under a certain slant, it's considered a flat surface that, as you say, kids can.
Okay,
So
now I
that's
get
where
it.
it's talking about the angle.
That was
of it.
that
Yeah.
measurement thing
So
that
if
he
you
had.
go to the one picture that kind of shows the whole place at back from a distance, I think it's like might be the second picture at the very beginning.
Well, that would be too easy. There you go. This is where you really need to have eyes in the back of your head. So there's,
All the way to the top. Because it's the only picture I remember where you really kind of saw the overall structure to really,
Yeah.
so the
Yeah,
next
if you
one.
go to page 12 and page 14.
Next one up, I think, isn't it?
Somebody's telling me to go down, somebody's telling me to go up.
I know, sorry.
Page 12 shows the whole structure.
There.
Oh, there.
Page 12.
Page 14 shows the angle.
so you're talking,
That
it sounds
purple.
like it's this piece here?
No, the
No,
purple
it's the
part.
purple,
The purple
it's
at
the
the
tube
very
slide.
top.
Oh, this one,
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
So the fact that the roof of that is under a certain angle or degree qualifies it as a place surface. And that's what he's talking about.
yeah, so he's extra concerned about us not having the certified mulch because the mulch basically would be certified and thick enough that if a kid did fall from 13 feet, they're much less likely to die with the proper surface underneath it.
Okay.
Actually, what
Yes.
that means is we would have to remove all the mulch that we have
Right.
and replace it with the proper thickness to
Mhm.
meet that standard. So,
That's what he said.
Well, and I think what we need to clarify with Hafner is if what we've purchased is certified. If not, then we need to replace it all.
Mhm.
I was gonna add what Ms. Schneider said earlier, which is it sounded like, which was new information to me, that he was saying we need to ask specifically to Game Time as well, if there's like, as Mr. Betcher was presuming there already was, if there's some kind of a blockade that can be put on the top of there, then it wouldn't be considered a playable surface. Presumably, but we need to have that verified.
And maybe it's like
Because it's-
spikes, like you do for birds on roofs.
Barbed wire.
How much mulch do you need for
Just
that?
sit an owl there.
Being recorded, actually.
It'll scare. So we're at 6:32.
All right, so, as Mr. Hirth had noted, really, the decision we need to make tonight is, do we go ahead and see if it's even possible to refurbish this piece of equipment? I can say personally, as a parent in the village and knowing other parents, this is a very popular piece of equipment. When people were reached out to, about potential additions to the park, emails came back saying, whoa, this isn't in lieu of what we have, right? You're gonna try to keep that. So that is my personal preference. We may hear from Game Time, sorry, we don't make those grates anymore, or we may get a quote that is $200,000. But I think it is worth it to, get the report back from them. Does anyone feel differently? Oh, Mr. Marks.
So, just listening to the whole thing, number one, he basically said you need to shut this thing down.
Yes.
Okay, so that needs to be done, I think, immediately.
Yeah, I think that's
You know,
administrative.
Or kind of flexible fencing stuff is the way to go.
Mhm.
Then I think you need to see how fast you can find somebody, that company to tell you if it can be refurbished.
Right.
And I think you need to seriously consider what it means to reconsider a 23-year-old piece of equipment with a 20-year expected life.
Certainly.
And then what it's gonna cost you year after year to have this inspected. And you're gonna be in constant corrections. Whatever you don't correct now, in 2 years is gonna be another problem, because I think the aging of this is gonna accelerate, right?
And what is unfortunate, as Mr. Hirth had said, is that we didn't have those annual inspections. So we are really in a poor position, a worse off position than we would be. One or two of our maintenance men will be getting certified and able to conduct these annual inspections, which
But
is
you don't have
great.
that.
We don't have that now, but apparently that is in the works.
So,
And if we could, I see getting rid of this and replacing it with what we could afford, which unfortunately is that $50,000 grant. I've looked into it. You're buying like a little tiny guy. And I think that sends the wrong message to our new families that are moving in, that we do not prioritize, them and their families and their playtime. And so I would like to see us refurbish this if possible, and additionally have an actual plan, as we have discussed, a long-term plan for the park, where we are able to transition out old stuff while providing new stuff, in a way that says we're investing in you, we're investing in our community, and we're going to try to continue to give you a place to play as we work through this.
question.
Sorry, Mr. Simley.
No, I just want to make sure I got a chance to talk
Oh, yeah, sure.
when you were done. A lot of that I agree with. However, I think that the message that, well, there are a couple of things. I think, first of all, we should be grateful that we've gotten 23 years of equipment that has a 20-year life expectancy, and that it is in as good shape as Greg indicated, all things considered. As Mr. Marks brought up, also the fact that we're always going to be dealing with the fact that this has reached the end of its life expectancy, and having to make modifications and adjustments to try and accommodate or deal with pieces that are potentially no longer available. I also think that the idea that getting rid of this equipment sends a message that we don't care is all in how the messaging is presented, because I think it also states something when old equipment is being presented or replaced with new equipment, modern equipment, standard, things that are meeting today's standards. The other thing is there is a continual opportunity to apply for grants.
Sure.
So establish a plan to expand on what we put into the park. that what we do now is not the end all be all, that's it, hope you like what you got.
Right.
It's something that handled the correct way is something that the residents will see a continuation of improvement.
And it also
Thank
sends,
you.
if we replace it, it also sends a message, I think, that we care about our children. Because this equipment is old, it's falling apart, it needs to be refurbished, it's out of compliance, it's old, we just don't need it anymore. And we're gonna continue working on it, we wanna keep your kids safe, so we'll get new equipment. I am not going to ever vote to refurbish this equipment and use taxpayer money. I am not gonna do that. I can tell you right now. I'm not gonna refurbish old equipment when we have $50,000 sitting over here that we can buy a new structure with. And then if it is smaller, I kind of understand where you're coming from, but if it's smaller, then like Mr. Simile said, we can start applying for grants and then we can start buying those smaller structures or whatever to go around it with it, you know, and have additional stuff. But also, we also need something for special needs to fulfill the American Disabilities Act too. And we don't have that with this equipment. You know, I think we need to be inclusive.
I agree that we need to be inclusive for sure.
So one of the things that we would be able to do is when we have our discussions, if we decide that the Game Time is the vendor that we want to talk to, they seem to be open to working with us. They've worked with other communities that are under the gun with grant money and so forth. I'm hoping, guy seems reasonable. You guys have had more contact with him than I have. I think he will work with us. The other piece of that is whatever we select, if we get something central that we can build on and go out from there, it also gives us the amount of time to do a plan going forward. And I wouldn't dismiss buying the smaller pieces at some point in time. But I think we also need to address the surface. And the surface itself, one of the biggest issues that we have, why that mulch is in as bad a condition it is every time we have a rain, like we did today, the water fills up in that area, the mulch floats across the sidewalk into the other side. So all this money we're spending on mulch is getting cut up in the grass, plus the guys are out there raking the mulch back all the time. We've got to address that wall and the drainage there. And before we put a lot of money into buying new mulch, I think we need to try and have a plan for how to mitigate some of that.
Well, it does seem that he made it seem like the surface issue was, sorry, I don't know who you're pointing to.
No, I think
But
I
the
was-
surface issue
Discuss.
is immediate. So while we do need to address the wall, obviously, and the slope and all of that, you know, I'm not sure how long we can go without just not having. Well, I guess if the playground's closed down, I guess we have time.
Well, we're not going to close the swings. I think we need
Right.
to address the couple of the hackles or shackles on the swings that need to be repaired.
Yeah.
Ms. Cheney has information on getting an ADA compliant swing that apparently the county has available. We need
Yes.
to look
Yeah.
into
I
that.
think that's a
Uh-huh.
free,
It's
that's
free.
a free,
They
it's a
give it to
freestanding
all-
one too,
all-
correct?
All communities, municipalities in Hamilton County get one.
So I think the bottom line is we need to have a plan. And I think the mayor had something.
Sorry, I
To
can't
comment
see you
on.
back there. Mr. Mayor?
To the point about the mulch, we have an estimate before we got this report, we had an estimate of, how much some additional equipment that had been rank ordered by the community. And included in that estimate was an estimate for how to put like a bumper wall along the sidewalk there, so that while we're waiting, and even potentially past the time that we fix the wall and the drainage issue, that we won't have all that mulch that we invest in running away, all right? And if you look at the pricing on it, it's pretty reasonable. I was surprised. I was expecting that we're gonna spend all of our money on that bumper wall. But it's, and my understanding is that is included in what can be included in the playground equipment. So there is an estimate there. So that's a known number, how much that would cost to,
How much is that?
it's
3,800.
total. Yeah, total for not just this area, but we had a mock-up where.
Sorry,
there's-
that was the mulch price.
Right.
Yeah, not the bumper price.
Okay, yeah, so the bumper price, they have, we have a price per unit, and then as well for the overall cost. But the overall cost would be even less, if we're looking at not adding on additional stuff, because the original mock-up had some items put on the other side as well, and they had a bumper around that as well, so just be a bumper around this one. To the point about the, are we investing in something that, we would, that might be more economic to just go ahead and replace it, and Ms. Cheney's point that should never vote for refurbishing that, or that she wouldn't vote to refurbish any of this stuff. I would ask for reconsideration of that. As Greg said, we can have another 10 years of life of this. And he wasn't saying, you can address the top 3 worst things, then of course the other things would become the top worst 3 things if we weren't addressing them. He was saying, address all of that stuff. And if you address all of it, we've got another 10 years. And during that 10-year time, yeah, we can have an economic plan where not just.
I'm sorry, that's not
That's
what
not
he
what he
said.
said. He said maybe possibly.
You're gonna have ongoing, he said you potentially will face ongoing issues with
Yeah.
making alternative replacements.
What I heard him say was that we're gonna have to continue to inspect this on a yearly basis, which is our plan to do, all right? What I heard him say is that we can, I didn't hear him say, well, potentially last 10 more years, that this is in great shape compared to other structures that are that age, and that potentially what I was piecing together is it has to do with how much traffic you have on it. And yeah, that could alter if it's suddenly more people are coming out, that's gonna deteriorate faster. But to my point about if we were to get 10 years or even 8 years more out of this, that's 8 years of our very good economic planning that we have in place now. And if this is a priority to replace the whole thing, we can replace the whole thing within that 10 years. And in the meantime, we've got extra stuff from this grant in there that shows the community that we are building this area to be more of a community area for the families that have kids. And to Ashley's point, I feel like that's a significant messaging to be sending. And to the point that we're sending the same message if we replace this with a smaller structure, we can ask the residents that, the people that have kids, before we even decide that without their input, we can ask them, will that seem as good, or will it seem like suddenly we have a third of the space for playing than we used to, and not as many kids will be able to be there? We can ask them that.
We don't
before
have that
make the
many kids
decision.
down here at one time anyway.
Well,
That's
things
not
like
true.
First Friday, and if we are using
Well,
our
the truck
park more
on
for
the truck thing,
events.
yeah.
Yeah, so hope,
But- The playgrounds, I was at Tip City last weekend, and they had this huge park there, and they have 2 small structures. It's a huge park. Kids will adapt. And if we keep adding on to
I think we
it,
figure out how much it's gonna cost.
Exactly, I was going to
If
make
it's
a
gonna be $5,000 to fix that thing, let's not step over
okay.
getting 5,000.
So, and that would be my recommendation. Let's get the information
Okay.
and see what the cost is. I don't think he really wants to say how much longer
Right.
we think it's gonna last. I think Game Time needs to tell us that,
Right.
because they should
Okay.
have some experience
All right.
doing this.
We have a quiet Mr. Knipp who has not spoken, so I'm gonna let him speak, and then we are at our 45-minute mark, so,
Just real quick, I've looked at the play equipment, I've gone through the report, I've had conversations with folks. It seems, I tend to agree with Matt and Ashley and everybody on kind of different sides of the fence. It's kind of a blessing right now. Whoever got that $50,000 grant, thank you. I don't know how that process occurred, but that hell of a job. Awesome. Now we're in a situation where we realize what we've got to do ongoing to really make that area an asset to the community. It seems to me that clearing that all out, putting brand new equipment in there is nice, but it will be just a teardrop, a little thimble of play area versus what it is now. And to Matt's point, I agree 100%. Let's see what the numbers are. If it's $5,000 to get that thing up to spec and another, $3,800 to lay down some mulch, and that buys us time as we're starting to get to a point now where we can focus on our 10-year plan.
Right.
That gives us time, and that whole area can change dramatically. I know there's talk of wet parks and all that. If we get an economic plan together and we've got a 10-year plan that includes what we're gonna do with the park and buildings and stuff like that, there's a lot of stuff going on in the background right now. That can be a key focus. And at this point, we're looking at something that's really not in terrible condition. It's not an excellent condition, but it's in good condition. And the things that were talked about seem to be fixable. And if we can fix them and go another 5 years as we're developing our plan and we see where our finances are, we can make that a higher priority. So let's get those numbers, see where we're at. My second biggest concern really is the timing, September 15th.
Right.
We need to figure out what we're doing. Should those numbers come back and be 40 grand?
Right.
And it doesn't make sense to replace them.
That's why this group is lucky enough to have probably another special meeting.
One very quick question.
I was going to let Mr. Marks, I saw his hand.
So just out of curiosity,
Yes.
what is the set, I don't know if you had conversations, what's a set like that cost today?
They cost, can I show
Am I
you?
thinking like you? Yeah.
Can I, would you like
That
to
was my
see?
exact same question. Is
I just want to
how
know
much does that?
This is
Comparable, I mean,
So remember, this is how we
Brand.
book.
this is,
I'm looking for a scale.
sure, out of a book, and this obviously doesn't include installation costs or taxes, something truly comparable with, I think the cheapest one I found that was truly comparable was, let's see, between $70,000 and $90,000.
So you're talking 125 by the time. it's
Right.
125.
So here's the approach that we might take though. This looks like it's 3 sections. We have, whatever you call that with the slides, we have the big twisty slide, we have this area with the bridge. So an approach, and we don't know this because the guy hasn't told us yet, maybe the approach is we replace this first, then we do this, and then we connect the two.
Yeah.
And that may be something that
Ship
we,
of Theseus,
say what now?
sorry.
What? Ship, is that what that is?
No, just
I
a dumb
know.
archaic or philosophical reference.
That's it.
But I think it's all conjecture until they come back and say this is what it is.
So I don't know, do we need to make a motion that we, wait, that we are,
So may I?
yes.
I would say, would anybody like to make a motion to direct the administration to investigate repair and refurbishment of the existing play structure and volunteer park?
Expeditiously.
Okay.
Rhonda's, are you making that motion?
To refurbish.
We're on it,
To
we're on it time.
investigate.
So you're making a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
And discussion.
Okay, we're on a time crunch. Can we also have Game Time design a new area for us at the same time,
Yes,
so we can compare them?
yes.
Then I'm
Can I
okay with that.
adjust that to say, plan A is to try to see if we can afford to get this fixed. If that doesn't happen, then plan B is automatically with purchase.
Yeah, plan B
It's
is,
automatically, Ron can do
So
that.
on Plan B, do we spend the $50,000 on one big piece or multiple smaller
That
pieces?
is-
That's the question.
that's the next question that we're gonna be dealing with, so.
But I want to comment one thing that Mary Lesmore said is, you can fix this, but it's fatigued.
Mhm.
And all it takes is for one of those things to break, that's irreplaceable.
And it's gonna break.
And then it becomes unusable and it starts to fall apart.
Yeah.
The fatigue of that, I just think, and actually, I think inspections are required to be weekly, not monthly, or not annually. I think I read that our inspectors are required to do it weekly. So
That's in the
anyway,
maintenance guide.
yeah, I think we're just buying a whole bunch of problems for 10 years that we're gonna constantly be having to deal with, inspections, getting the right parts, and the instant it becomes unavailable, then it's a mess. If that big slide goes away and we can't replace it or what, I just see it as a whole bunch of problems.
And that's why I think we need to hear from that manufacturer.
Right, and the
So the
last thing
rep-
is about the curb.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So the rep that I sent the report to today, his first reaction after looking at it was probably too many things to fix. But he said that they would look at it. There's no cost to us to get that information. If there is a cost, I think at that point, we need to consider whether or not we want to go through that. The other piece of it is I think it makes sense to say to them, you've measured our space. What kinds of things do you have that can replace this that are within our budget? And then if that becomes undoable, maybe what we look at is tearing this down and doing some of the smaller things selectively in that space until we have a plan to move forward. But I think what we have to do is we need to figure out how to apply for grants, because Ms. Cheney saw that there was a grant application on their website.
Game
There-
Time has one right now.
I looked into that too, if I could just give some information on that. Game Time has a 100% matching grant. They will make a decision within 2 to 3 days.
Of now,
It's due,
Of now, it's
it's
due,
due November 2nd, though, it says.
it's due this, it's closes the 2nd, but they're taking it, I think, on a rolling
Oh,
basis. So it is a 100% matching grant, but only for play sets. So it is purchasing a
Okay.
thing like that, not individual pieces.
so can you guys apply for that?
Yeah, it's only a
I-
one page. Can we do
It
it?
is really,
And I don't know,
I
is there,
that was my next question is I don't know if you could use grant money
Uh-huh.
to match
For
a
grant
matching
money.
grant,
Uh-huh.
but that,
well,
We're
here's
paying
the
out of
thing,
pocket.
the way this
Well, that's right,
grant
we're paying it
works,
first. That's right.
the way the grant works is we're gonna have to front the money.
Right.
We take the paid receipt, give it to the county, they pay us back.
So
I would
we're
say
writing a check
yes.
again.
I would, I believe that it shouldn't just be a council member applying for this, because when you click on it, it does ask some specific questions like,
Stormwater and,
there are some questions like that. It's not too in-depth, but I feel a statement, a request for this grant should come from the administration or from the mayor.
I'm
And
not gonna be around.
can we make a motion to compel Stefan to do something?
It's up to you.
All right,
So before we go any further, we have a motion and a second on
yes,
the floor.
that is right.
So I amended the motion to state, motion to direct the administration to investigate repair and refurbishment of the existing play structure, along with investigating cost of a new structure. Ms. Cheney, if you're okay with that, made the original motion, I believe. Did you?
I know Rob did.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And can you add the grant?
This is why I don't take notes.
To that information?
I made the adjustment.
Ron, can you
For
add
the
the
new
grant
design.
information to that too, in terms of like play structure?
Let's do that separately, because this is a
Okay.
huge run-on sentence. And who seconded it?
I did.
And
Is this an all in favor, aye, or roll call?
it depends. Is anybody not in favor? So if everybody, so go ahead and do a
Okay.
voice vote.
Sorry, so I go, Ms. Cheney.
Yes.
No, you can
Oh,
just
sorry,
say,
all in
Oh.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
any opposed?
I can't vote.
Okay.
Oh.
You guys, everybody
That's
keeps
right.
looking at me, but-
That's right.
Everybody keeps looking at
That's
me
right.
during votes, and I'm like.
So to get this done, somebody's gonna have to contact Andy tomorrow. I know Andy's working on audit stuff. So who wants to make that phone call? Do you want to contact him? Does the mayor want to contact him?
Contact Greg.
No,
Sorry.
Andy.
Andy. So it probably needs to be you since you're familiar with the
The grant?
grant.
Okay, so I'm requesting Andy to fill this information, this out for us.
Well, I talked to him about it, see if there's
About the
anything that he
grant.
can get together.
Okay,
Because if he can, he'll do it quickly.
okay,
I don't know that I'll get to talk to him.
okay. I'll
Before
give him
you
a call
talk to him.
tomorrow.
Okay.
You know, the solution here might be a hybrid of everything we've talked about.
Yeah.
Because again, as Mr. Hurth pointed out, this structure is kind of 3 structures.
Mhm.
The solution may work out best if we focus on refurbishing part of this
Mhm.
and then work on replacing to where one structure as it builds phases out the other structure. which I know just complicates how this works, but
That's good.
it doesn't necessarily have to be
You're on a
an
budget.
all or
You're on
none
a
thing
budget, so-
Yeah.
necessarily.
When I heard him talk about this, I thought it was this side, and my first thing was, why don't we just take that down?
Right.
If there's a problem with it. So really, it's the other side, but maybe that makes sense, then that would create additional space to do some of the other things that you've looked at.
Right, I mean, or we might get this information back and we might find out we're chopping some of it off, we're fixing the other half, that only costs $10,000, and hey, we have $40,000 to add the little individual pieces that help, for the times that we do have to close down or phase out further portions of this.
Is
The thing is it kind of complicates the administration, like the approach of, like what they're asking from game time. Because it's not only,
Right.
hey, what is it to refurbish this whole thing? It's like, okay, if we look at parting this out, is there a part of it that makes more sense from a ability to refurbish it, for example?
So I think the first question is to get a complete understanding of what it will take to fix this. And they may come back and say, toast.
Right,
We don't
sorry,
wanna
we
do
don't
it.
make those anymore.
So we'll find that out. Then the second question would be, if there is a piece of that that's salvageable, what is, and what can we do? That's probably question 2. Question 3 would be, is there something available that we can chunk this out? And I think Ms. Snyder, the mayor, had his hand up
Mr.
next.
Mayor,
So to the piece about how our particular representative has laid things out before, he has laid them out very well line item wise. So I think that will, if they come back with saying, here's what it would cost to refurbish each of those pieces, that would give us good intel about, well, this part of it looks like it might not even be worth it. Let's just replace that piece. So to your point, I think, yeah, excellent. I think we could get some good information from them. To Ms. Cheney's point about the ADA compliance, I'm thinking that that's a great idea, and I haven't heard a motion towards pursuing that and figuring out within this plan that Game Time is proposing. We should probably give them a heads up that we'd like to have some room for this additional swing in there. There's also, just FYI, we discussed this at the previous meeting, there's another ADA thing, that's this merry-go-wall thing, which when we were talking to the residents about their top 3 things, it's number 2. All right, so it's like this thing that spins around and kids with disabilities can physically sit in it, and they don't look like they're sitting in something different than the other kids are sitting in. And it's everyone's sitting in the same kind of thing. It's made so that people with disabilities can sit in it.
And that's standalone.
What's that?
And that's standalone.
yeah, it's a piece of steel.
Yeah, so there's these other options to add, if we go the add-on way, that we can be, showing the community that we're focused on this, addition beyond just a swing.
And adults can use that too, because their picture shows an adult in it.
So in that vein, would somebody like to motion to ensure that the project is ADA compliant?
Or has
Or
ADA
has-
compliance?
I would like it to have components. I will make a motion that we ensure that the plan has ADA components. And if I can make it longer,
Sure.
that we ensure there is room saved in our plan to fit the swing that is available for free through the grant. Basically, that we save room in the park.
I don't know that we want to get that specific.
Okay.
I think we know that it needs to be ADA compliant.
Okay.
So the motion is to ensure that ADA compliant components are incorporated into the project.
And then
You
you second.
second it,
Second.
yeah.
Who motioned?
I did.
And Mr. Simley seconded.
Discussion?
All in favor?
Could we put that swing, the 80, whatever that is, where the other swings are in place of one of those?
I don't know what it looks like, maybe.
Well, it's like a scoop thing, made out of the same fabric like the materials, like the slide. And it has this great big thing that goes up over the child so they can't fall out. Kind of locks them in.
I think,
And it's, the picture shows lifting a child out of the wheelchair
The
into it.
structure itself.
well, the other thing that we probably need to take a close look at, and I'll ask the maintenance folks to do this,
Okay.
but some of the measurements of the actual work area or play area we need to make sure that we're compliant there. I
Okay.
missed who made that motion,
I did,
Add it as a separate one.
and Mr. Simile seconded.
Yes.
and we all in favor, all were in favor. Wow, we were doing so good on time, now look what happened.
The $50,000 grant is what we're investigating even in the scope of the grant.
Did you put it on the motion?
We did,
Okay.
Is it in the scope and spirit of the grant? I know there's not a whole lot of documentation.
Could be. I think a lot of it determines how well. Could be. Yeah,
thank you.
I don't want to get down that road. The important thing is that we have engaged somebody to help design this for us. We have an expert who's going to help us address the issues that we've seen. I think it's important that we work with the service department, and if you could relay that to Andy. In fact, I'll send him a text message this evening that they need to figure out a way to rip that off. And the last time they put stakes around it with that orange netting, which was pretty effective. And then there was a third thing, I can't remember what it was.
All right, Mr. Mayor.
So that, I mean, that, obviously that's critical. So our first step is to make sure that that thing's corded off.
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. Van Harn raised the question about whether we would need a motion as well to make sure we're pursuing that matching grant.
Do we need a motion to say that we're pursuing the matching grant?
Sure.
Would anyone like to make that motion?
I'll make a motion to pursue the matching grant.
And do I have a second?
So I'm going to make this motion to pursue any available matching grants. And who motioned?
I did.
Mrs. Street.
Rob was the second.
Mhm.
And then all
Was
in,
there any discussion?
any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay. And with that, I think that this has been productive. I appreciate everyone who came and the discussions that we had. And maybe next time we have another one of these special meetings, we could have to.
So,
Is that a
and you're in charge.
And, perfect.
So here's the thing, if you guys decide, if we get this information back over the next week, you may want to consider calling another special meeting to discuss this and engage Mr. Gruey to have a talk with us about this.
I agree.
And I'll be in touch, so.
Would he, I know he's following back up with you. Would you keep me appraised when he?
Yeah, and I was gonna ask-
Should I continue to try to reach out as well? Or would
If
rather-
you would, could you ask him for a time frame? Because I'm not gonna be able to do that, and maybe we can get an answer on that and know by Friday.
Okay.
Perfect.
That would be helpful.
All right, so I have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Can I have a second?
Simile Janet, got it.
All right, all in favor? Or sorry, discussion?
Minority opinion.
native will rebel?
I sure hope it's not raining when we get out there.
It was thundering.
Was it?
Really?
Dang it.